Greg Everett, Ursula Garza, Weightlifting Life Podcast. We're back again. Sorry, this one's coming out a little late, but you know, things happen, and Ursula hates me, so we just can't stick to a schedule to save our lives.
I was waiting for him to say it's Ursula's fault. So
well, no, I don't have to say that. Everyone already knows that.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
That's a given.
It's my fault.
No, it's fine. Okay. It was the 4th of July anyway, so for those of you in the U.S., you were probably too drunk to listen anyway. So, or perhaps in the hospital getting your fingers sewn back on. We don't know. It probably wouldn't have gotten listened to as much. So the delay is just fine. Go to healthiq.com/catalyst if you need to get some life insurance or some new life insurance or some better life insurance for less money, because these guys use scientific facts to get you lower rates because of your better health, because you lift weights. So they're going to get you the best rates possible. And that'll be great. It'll be great for you and your family, and everyone will thank you after you're dead. All right. Ursula just got back from about 1,000 other trips. You guys are lucky she's even on this show, honestly. You should write her emails and thank her.
No, it's enough. Thank you, Greg, for thanking me for them. I just downloaded 123 emails, please.
Oh, geez. So basically what she's saying is that instead of doing this show, she's going to be reading emails and then just half-assing her answers for you guys.
I'm going to tell you right now that I found the questions, Greg.
Okay.
Nice title.
I told you I sent them. Okay. I thought there was more to that statement than that. I thought you were leading into something else.
I can't say anything.
I found the questions
and
I found the questions, but
that's it.
Just I found the questions. Okay, well, let's read some questions then. Okay. Somehow every single show the last several times I've picked at least one question that has a name that I'm not sure how to pronounce. So this is either Case or Casey. Asks, I listened to your last podcast and have diagnosed myself as a chicken shit. Am I just a bad person, or is there any hope? Over the last few months, I have picked up the annoying habit of clerking snatches or cleans when the pull feels too heavy, even though the resulting pull always looks like it's more than high enough to, at the very least, get under safely. I never used to do this. I think I started a few months ago when I was going through a rough phase with my training, going down a weight class, and probably lost some confidence. That'll do it. Oh man, you get lighter and all of a sudden those weights feel heavier.
Weights feel heavy. Yep.
Well, you're self-diagnosed as a chicken shit. That's Ursula's terminology.
Because I'm the mean one.
She is the mean one.
I'm the name caller.
I'm the nice, welcoming, comforting one. Tolerant and understanding and loving. You're not a bad person. Well, actually, I take that back, Case. You could be a bad person. We don't really know that from just this question alone. You could be the worst person on earth. Well, no, you couldn't be the worst person on earth because you listen to the show, which gives you at least 1 point on the board in the positive side of things. But you're definitely not a bad person because you're a chicken shit or because you clerk weights. Everyone has clerked weights. And I think it's important to understand that that term clerking is named after Ken Clark, who was a fantastic weightlifter. And even he did that a couple times and unfairly got the thing named after him. But so it's not just you. You're not a terrible person because of that.
Okay, let me ask you, Greg. How many times have you clerked a weight?
You know, honestly...
here we go.
It's less than 5. I very, very rarely have done it.
Yeah. How many times have you done it in a competition, other than if you were hurt?
I've never clerked in a competition. And the only time I've failed to total in a competition is when my shoulder exploded.
Right. I remember that. That's why I was saying it.
That doesn't count. I didn't clerk it.
If you have an exploding articulation, then you're,
I mean, in retrospect, I wish I had clerked that one, but it would have bought me 2 more years of training. What a dummy.
Yeah. I clerked once in competition, and there were 2 things going on. One, I was severely hurt, and 2, the bar was moving so slow that no one in their right mind would have tried to get under it. And in training, so you said just a handful of times. I think I've clerked in training maybe two. One was recently, and it drove me nuts. But when I was competing, I think maybe 2 times.
That's pretty good.
It's not a good habit to have.
Well, I don't think anyone would argue that it is.
No, but for her to say she's doing it regularly, that's and for sure she's correctly diagnosed the problem. When you're going down a weight class, if you don't, accommodate, like weights are now going to feel heavier. Yeah. And so if you don't make that accommodation in the weights that you're selecting, or you keep trying to work off your maxes that were from a heavier weight class, they may actually, now she's saying that it appears to be high enough when she's, looks at video or whatever, but you may feel like the lack of speed. And I think that's, for a lot of people, what makes them hesitant, is that the bar may be moving, it's just not moving fast enough. And so once you detect that, you feel like it might be unsafe to go under. And that may be, at the beginning of that process, something, in terms of self-preservation, the brain's doing the right thing. But if you've turned it into some sort of a habit, I would say that what you need to do is really lower the weights and start doing more reps with lower percentages and working your way back up. Because basically when you take let's say 85% and you hit it for a triple, that third rep at 85% feels and moves a lot like your 92 or 95%. And so then that gives you the confidence to have, but you're not dealing with the same weight, because sometimes it's the number that causes people to clerk. Like they get stuck on. I remember getting over 70 in my head. I missed it a lot before I hit it. And then once I hit it, it was no big deal. Yeah. So you have to take the stigma off of it. So if there's weight, that's one thing she didn't tell us. It's like, are there certain numbers? For a lot of people, that clerking happens at certain numbers that they've just over-assigned value to. They're weights that they can do. They've just, in their head, made them seem bigger than they are, and heavier than they are. And so what we, in those cases, what we try to do is we'll rep at something closer to it, to try to get the sense of what a heavier snatch is going to feel like in terms of how fast it's moving. And then when you go to do heavier singles, they don't feel like something you've never done before. Even though the number's higher, they basically feel like a third rep at a lower percentage. So I would try to work my way back up, doing a few more reps in these lifts to try to create the sense of a heavier snatch with a lighter weight, so that you can then overcome whatever is going on in that noggin of yours that's stopping you from going under a weight that is high enough.
Yeah, right? The losing or dropping a weight class is probably a huge part of this. And there's this weird idea out there in the world that people expect to be able to lose 10 pounds, 15 pounds, and preserve every bit of the strength they had at the heavier weight class. Now, it's possible, it happens sometimes, but it's extremely unlikely.
And usually there's a dip before it goes back up.
Well, sure. You need to get, you need to be accommodated to that new weight class, and you won't necessarily ever be as strong as you were at a heavier weight class if you were really good at that heavier weight class. I'm guessing Case or Casey. I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is.
I think it's Casey.
I think so, but I've never in my life seen it spelled that way.
I think I have.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
If Casey were a really advanced lifter, and then dropped a weight class, I would say it would be less likely for her to ever surpass what she had done at the heavier weight class. But I'm assuming she's relatively new, so absolutely she'll probably be able to surpass at this new lighter weight class what she did at the previous heavier weight class, but it will take time. So you basically need to erase your PRs and start fresh in this new weight class. Like if you were, say, a 69 and you're now a 63, you need to have a whole new set of PRs as a 63. You're a different human being. and that 6 kilos can make a huge bit of difference. I mean, that's 15 plus pounds. So like Ursula said, you basically need to rewire yourself in terms of what your expectations are with regard to the weights you're doing or should you feel like you should be doing, or how they feel, all that sort of thing. And that takes some time, it takes some training, and it takes, again, resetting those PRs so that you're not saying, well, this is only 75%, why does it feel so hard? Well, because it's not 75% anymore. It might be 85%. And if it were 85% of your old PR, you wouldn't be surprised that it felt like that. So you just really need to kind of shake your brain loose a little bit. As far as what else to do about it is we did a show, God, I don't know, probably like 10 episodes ago at this point, about kind of getting through mental barriers and different ways to do it. And I listed a bunch of different ways. Ursula listed a bunch of different ways. And then I posted an article maybe a month or two ago about getting through mental barriers with the snatch and clean and jerk. So there's a lot of different ways, but it would be things like kind of
clusters.
Working right at the threshold of where you shit the bed, creeping up towards it and kind of working, doing singles there as much as you can, kind of working up in progressive waves. So you kind of work towards it, back off a little bit, work up closer to it, back off a little bit, work up to it or past it, that sort of thing. And then doing, clusters. So kind of the multiple reps.
You just said the waves, but I wrote down in my notes here as you were talking, clusters and waves. I think clusters are really good. Or if you do timed stuff, EMOMs, or it doesn't have to be an EMOM, but, timed, like on the minute, or, 1 minute of rest, it gets your mind out of it because you just don't have time to think about it. So for somebody who's a head case, either clusters or EMOMs, things like that.
Oh my God, EMOMs, stop it. Of course it's every minute. Just call it on the minute.
Well, but we don't even actually do EMOMs. We do like you do the snap, you do your rep, and then we actually time a full minute between, like it's a meet.
We do on the minute with snatches, sometimes with clean and jerks, but typically what I'll do is on the minute with the snatch and then 1 minute rest with the clean and jerk.
For clean and jerks. I've even done like 90-second rest.
Amy's done 90-minute rest between sets. Yeah. That's actually her pretty typical workout right there. Does one set, goes and writes a chapter of a novel on her phone, comes back, does another set.
Oh, yeah. What did she do to anybody? Why is she being...
she didn't do anything. She just rests a really long time between sets.
Okay, don't do 90-minute rest. Do 90-second, maybe. Just anything that's going to keep your mind off of the weight that's on the bar.
Yeah, anything that prevents you from sitting down and dwelling on your fear and dread of a certain weight. Another thing to keep in mind, too, is that it's really important to get it into your brain permanently that snatches and cleans are probably going to feel really heavy off the ground. I remember Bob Morris coached me for about a year, a number of years ago. And he would always want me to give him feedback, what's going on. And I remember one day I emailed him and I said something like, everything felt really heavy today. And his notoriously brief email were always great. But this one was something like, it's weightlifting. It's supposed to feel heavy.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to, you have to remember that, especially as you progress, some people might feel strong off the floor depending on how they're built and kind of just basically chance, luck of the draw with that particular kind of mechanical circumstance. But for most people, weights are going to feel pretty heavy off the floor. That's the reason people use dynamic starts, to try to make it feel less shitty and get it moving faster and a little more easily off the floor. You have to remember, though, that once you get past your knee, a little higher, towards the thigh, your mechanics are going to improve. And it doesn't necessarily matter if it feels really heavy and slow off the floor. What matters is how it feels and what you can do with it above the knee. And so I think doing kind of finding ways to convince yourself of that fact, whether for you it is doing really heavy pulls or doing lots of hang or block work from above the knee, whatever the case is. And the higher hang and block stuff can be helpful because it basically proves to you that you can get a bar accelerated and elevated and get yourself under it with very little time and distance, so that if you're pulling a bar off the floor and you're like, oh my God, if it just took me 10 seconds to get it above my shoelaces, you're not going to necessarily panic. You have that confidence to say, well, I just need to keep moving it and focus on my position, so that once I'm past the knee, I'm in a better position. I can really accelerate it. Everything's going to be fine. I'm not going to die. And you see lifters who, it looks like they're doing a deadlift until that bar is practically at the hip. And you're thinking, there is no way this guy or girl is going to get under this bar. And then all of a sudden they're under the bar. Caleb Ward was my favorite guy to watch like that. He did a clean and you're like, this is the world's slowest deadlift. And then all of a sudden it was like a bomb going off once that thing was near his hip. And he was incredibly fast under the bar too. So if you're someone who, by virtue of your build, it is a very slow first puller, you're really going to have to pull your head out of your butt and start trusting that that matters much, much, much less than what you can do from above the knee. Or you could just go back up a weight class and just solve the whole problem in a couple of weeks.
Just get fat again. What's the problem?
Yeah, I've been fat for years. I don't give a shit.
Yesterday I was coaching one of the girls, and there was only a few of us in the gym because we're not usually there on Wednesdays. So it was like all girls, and one of the girls was missing a lift that was so obviously not hard in terms of like it actually being heavy for her. And she was just kind of petering out after her hip. She just wasn't doing a lot. And I finally just levied a threat. I was like, look, if you miss the next lift, because obviously we could have gone down. I said, if you miss the next lift, you're going to have a bunch of reps coming your way. She did not miss the next lift. Like sometimes you just need something to push you to make sure you make it. So we do what's called the snatch game. And it's it's heavy on snatch and kind of low on fun game, but it's not really a game. It's more like
one of those
snatch
games that you would call traditionally enjoyable.
Yeah, it's kind of like snatch prison. But if you miss, so we'll go up. If you miss a lift, so we'll do it sometimes, like when we're doing some on the minute stuff, and if you miss one. We would do this thing every once in a while just for fun, where like for 10 minutes or sometimes 15 minutes, every minute we'll hit like an 85% snatch, because you should be able to do those, or 80% snatch. If you miss one out of the 15, you then devolve to, let's say we're doing them at 85. Now you have to do 80 for doubles. It's still on the minute, so now you've got to fit 2 reps in.
Ugh.
If you miss one of those, then you have to go down to 75 for triples.
Yikes.
If you miss one of those, you have to go down to 70 for fours. And it just goes down where you could be doing the goddamn bar for 15 reps on the minute if you fuck up enough. And so
I would just keep missing so I could just do the bar.
To the bar.
So like, man, I'm killing this game. I'm doing fucking 15s on the minute.
I have seen it. That changes the workout considerably.
I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, because
I couldn't live with myself.
But it's amazing how people who will miss an 85% snatch just randomly when they're doing 2 or 3 singles of it can do 15 in a row if they know that they're going to have to do it. Weightlifters are particularly opposed to any kind of reps, just by nature. And that's how you know whether you're a weightlifter or not. If you like reps, you're probably not really a weightlifter. But if you hate reps and you want to do all singles in your workout, you just kind of got, an edge on everybody else, because the whole sport and competition is premised on 1 heavy single, or 3 heavy singles. But in any case, you'd be surprised. Like, I've had people after literally 20 minutes of singles hit PRs.
Oh,
which
yeah.
tells
Weird
you,
stuff happens.
Which tells you that shit was all in their fucking head. And what I managed to do was get their head out of it, because they were so fucking delirious that they couldn't even think about it. They were just following a movement pattern that they had honed for 20 fucking minutes. And fatigued or not, they were able, just by virtue of maintaining a movement pattern, to do a new max lift. Not kidding. It's sometimes it's the weirdest shit, but it gets their head out of it, and it levies some sort of a punishment for a miss that then is the encouragement they need to make it. So maybe Casey needs the snatch game in her life. Maybe with lower weights too, Casey. I mean, you're, as Greg pointed out, like, I've gone up and down weight classes. I remember going down to the 54s from being a 59, and everything felt like a fucking ton. It was all I could do to force myself to hit lifts. And it's a huge advantage to know that you've done something before. So even if it's moving incredibly slow and you're like, there's no fucking way, in the back of your head, like, I've done this a million times, I have to do it. How embarrassing it will be if I don't do it, you know? So that
everyone's going to hate me.
Yeah, I'm going to embarrass myself right now, because this is a weight that I used to do triples with, you know? So, you kind of push yourself. Sometimes you need that, some sort of negative reinforcement. Oh, no, positive reinforcement, sorry.
Yeah, I like how you somehow spun punishment into positive reinforcement. I don't think that's really how it works, but I'm with you. Sometimes people just need to be scared of being embarrassed. There's nothing with having an innate sense of shame in not doing something that you want to do. That's the whole basis of ambition and commitment and stuff. Oh boy. All right, getting a little far afield into psychology here. Michael asks, this is a fantastic sentence. It was like he wasn't really sure how he wanted to say it, so he just did it all together. Help when I go for a heavy clean and try to receive the bar, my upper back rounds and I always lose the lift forward. The pull feels easy and my max clean is 74% of my max front squat, so I should have the leg strength to stand with it. You should have all the strength to stand with it. What upper back accessories and or mobility work should I do to strengthen with the receiving position? Neither. Michael, come on, man. 74% of your front squat. The problem is not strength in any part of your body. The problem is what you're doing in the clean, bro. That thing, either you are lifting that bar straight up instead of bringing it back towards you in the turnover, or you're swinging the bar away, like, for example, bumping it off your thighs, or you are throwing it 12 feet into the air and then jumping down underneath it and letting it fall down on top of you. It's definitely not a lack of strength or mobility. If you can. So you're saying the where the bar is being placed in the receiving position. I'm saying that his receiving position in the clean is either not the same as his position in the front squat, and that is likely due to the second thing, that is the bar is either moving away from him, not moving back toward him like it needs to, or is going too high and separating from him and crashing on him. So, Michael, think of it this way. If you took 74% of your best front squat and you sat, kind of held yourself at near a parallel squat position and then had someone take that 74% of your front squat and drop it onto your shoulder 6 inches, how would that feel? Because that's basically what you're doing in this clean. So you're taking a weight that normally wouldn't be hard for you to stand up with, and you're introducing all these new factors that are making it really, really difficult for you to complete that clean. Would you agree or disagree? And if you disagree, I put placement of the bar. So you're diagnosing why the placement of the bar, which is good, why it's forward, but it's, for whatever case, it's not in the same rack position that he uses for his front squat. So he's not able to use that leg strength if he's losing it forward. I agree with you. I do think that there might be a case to do some mobility work, but we won't know until we can get the bar back onto his chest. I've got a guy right now that came in. He's a thrower, big guy, strong guy,
And
instead of one of those little tiny weak throwers that are so common out there
that suck. Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's some. They just aren't very high level.
You've just never heard of them.
That's right. But he, it does have some mobility issues, and in part, the mobility issues made it difficult for him to get the bar to a good rack position. But a lot of what we worked on at this point has been his pull mechanics, and just by improving the pull mechanics, the bar is landing in a better position. And although he still seems to have an upper back that is rounded, he can stand up with it. It's not pulling him forward. He just doesn't have a good upright position. Right. And so, continuing to work on thoracic mobility in his case, and we did have to work on some lat. His pecs are fucking huge and in the way. Lats are super tight. So we've worked on some rack position stuff too. I say I've been traveling, and David Griffin has been doing all of my work in my stead, and is actually now the beneficiary of two excellent athletes that were transitioning one from thrower to weightlifter and the other from powerlifter to weightlifter. And he's doing great work. Both of them have significant mobility work to do, but a lot of it that we're focused on right now is in the gym is just getting good mechanics for the pull so that they're not out of position. So once they do have that mobility to get full positions, they have the bar in the right place.
Yeah.
And that's, even more important.
I think it's an important point too, talking about the mobility, that, if you have, limited T-spine mobility, so you're a little hyperkyphotic or whatever the case is there, or even limited, lower body mobility, so it's a tough position for you. You can still get away with quite a lot of that if you position yourself directly under the bar in that squat. Because I would argue that the problem with the rounding back is not so much the back being round, it's the back rounding. In other words, it's the action of that back collapsing forward that creates the problem, because that's what's shifting the bar forward, shifting your weight out of position, shifting your balance out of position. Not that the simple, flexed position of the back in and of itself is not the problem, although it would be nice to not have that. So if that is the case, like Ursula said, that you do have some mobility that needs to be worked on, we can't tell you that obviously from this question, but take a look at it. If it looks like you're a hunchback when you're doing front squats, then obviously it's a problem. So for as far as that goes, both for strength and mobility, I think actually Ursula, you talked about this in the last podcast, clean grip overhead squats or Zotz presses are fantastic, or press and clean, whatever you want to call them. Any kind of weighted back extension, if you hold the weight behind your neck, quit doing back extensions where you hold weight on your chest. It doesn't help that upper back extension at all. And in fact, arguably it makes it worse, because you're naturally going to round forward and totally isolate the extension to the lumbar spine. Good mornings, things like that. Anything, it's all fairly obvious stuff in my opinion. And then pause front squats, and even pause back squats, but pause front squats, obviously, as long as it's, you have to stick with weights and reps that allow you to maintain the proper position. If you just load it up and you put yourself right back in that rounded back position, well, it's not going to be too effective now, is it? As far as fixing the actual technical problems with the cleans, again, hard to say exactly where it's going wrong. So you might have to self-diagnose that, get a video from the side and kind of see, number one, if the bar actually moves forward away from you, and if so, when. So is it, bumping off your thighs really low because you're not staying over the bar long enough, or because your elbows are locked stiff and you're just swinging, something like that? Or is it in the turnover itself where you bring your elbows back and in towards your side, so you basically reverse curl it and swing it around? So figure that out. And then for the turnover itself, I'm a huge fan of tall cleans and muscle cleans. And I know, Ursula, you like the old muscle cleans too. Mm-hmm. So
this guy got those. We had to teach him how to get the bar. It's funny because we have video from him just a couple of months ago, cleaning 150. He could only power clean it because the bar was always in front.
Yeah.
right? So he could only, and he would miss them, even though they were, almost legs fully extended height. And yesterday he sent a video of him cleaning from the blocks. So a shortened pull, much slower, like just trying to control how he was moving almost. And he was able to place the bar on his chest. So he was not able to do full cleans only because he was not placing the bar in the right place. And so that's kind of what this guy is describing, where the bar is always too far forward on his delt and it's pulling him forward. At least that's what we're assuming is happening. It appears that's what's happening. And so, this guy's front squat was through the roof compared to his clean. And so it's that same phenomenon that you have to learn the correct bar placement so that you're recreating that front squat. And that could, there's a host of variables that could impede your front rack position. But if your front rack position is fine, then it's, obviously a pull.
Right.
I'm doing emails, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I don't care about the show either.
That's not true. I do care. I just got sidetracked for a second. Sorry.
All right. Well,
are you hearing any sounds or anything?
I'm not listening to you anyway. I don't know. Oh, okay. Well, I heard your little buzzing thing earlier, but I do not hear it now. So hopefully no one.
Well, my phone hasn't rang and the dog hasn't barked. So this is such an.
Oh, that's 1 out of 26. Episode. Congratulations.
Well, we're not done.
Yeah, you're right. There is plenty of time. Okay. Milo asks, in the split jerk, at what point should you begin driving up with the arms? Once you are at full extension and your feet are almost off the platform, or when you actually start the split and they are completely airborne? I've been struggling with press outs, one elbow, and I think that my timing is the primary contributor, as at heavy weights I tend to short step, although this may be a separate but related issue. I like this question because this is one of those things where I think the jerk gets very little attention relative to the snatch and clean. And I've seen some of the funniest reactions by people when you tell them technical information about the jerk. Like I've had a couple there was some guy who would always comment on our website who just must hate my guts. I don't know who it is, but he just can't stand me. And so anything I write, he's got some comment about it like, this is so simple, you're making it so complicated, and it's not. You just do this. And on and on. I think his name is Rick. So Rick, if you listen to this show too, go fuck yourself. So he
doesn't listen to it because he can't comment. It's so fun.
Yeah, exactly. He's just at home, just like red-faced, crushing pencils in his fists or something. That son of a bitch, Greg Everett. He doesn't know anything about jerks.
Probably that meme, the internet coach meme.
Yeah.
Probably modeled after.
So this is the way that I teach it, and this is not anything original. That's the funny thing is like the stuff I was saying in this article that I'm thinking of that Mr. Rick was getting all butthurt about. This is stuff that has been documented by the Soviets decades ago. This is scientific fact. It's not just some dipshit American coach on the internet pulling stuff out of his ass. So Rick, do some homework. We're
talking to Milo now.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm talking to Rick.
God,
he needs to do his homework to not get so pissed off about shit that he thinks isn't true. He needs to learn his history when it comes to weightlifting. He's one of those guys who's like, I've been weightlifting for 75 years. Yeah. It's like, well, fuck, how have you learned so little in that long? I couldn't do that if I tried, Rick. Okay.
Well, I probably got old somewhere on the way.
So, Milo, my first piece of advice is don't ever be Rick. Okay. So, with the jerk, basically the time you want to start pushing with the arms is the time where the bar reaches its maximum upward speed. So in one sense it's simple that way, but the problem is that the bar is going to reach its maximal upward speed at different points of the drive based on the lifter's type of dip and drive. And I feel like we've talked about this before too.
We did. We talked about the the physiology of that, like if you're fast twitch or slow twitch,
right?
And how that will impact how high you can drive a bar.
I basically split it into, I guess I can't say split it because it's a spectrum, but I there's a spectrum in my brain that goes from more of a strength-based dip and drive to more of an elasticity-based dip and drive. So the strength is going to be a lower dip or deeper dip, a slower change of direction at the bottom, and therefore a longer drive. In other words, it's going to take more distance and time for that lifter to get that bar to maximal speed. And so if you have someone who's more of a strength jerker, this deeper dip, longer drive, slower drive, then they're going to have to wait longer before they start pushing with the arms. If you have someone on the other end of the spectrum whose jerk is really dependent on that elasticity in their dip and drive, they're going to have a much shallower dip, a quicker change of direction at the bottom, and they're going to achieve that maximum upward speed sooner in the drive. So they'll get to it before the drive is complete. And so that's why I laugh at a guy like Rick who's like, you just push when you're done driving. It's like, well, okay, it must be nice to be able to reduce the universe into such simplistic fucking terms, but so that's not necessarily true. In a sense, if you are very in tune with your body and you can feel that timing, which a lot of people can naturally, those are the ones who are just naturally really good at jerks. They feel that kind of maximal speed, and they begin moving into that next phase when they're pushing with the arms and beginning to split the feet. So for those of us mere mortals who actually have to think about this stuff and actually work hard and get better at stuff, you do need to consider what your dip and drive is like and to kind of adjust your timing based on that. And it's not necessarily super easy to do, and it isn't a black and white thing. It is a spectrum, so it takes some experimentation. Ursula, can you just like refine all that babbling shit I just said into something simpler for people?
Probably not. So I think anecdotal terms, and when we look at the exercises that we use to help with this, it's gonna, if we try to find a position of where the bar is going to be when I'm starting to drive on it, somewhere between like the top of your eyebrow and right above your head. And that's why so if somebody fast twitch is probably going to get higher, like right at the top of their head. And so we've got this kind of conventional wisdom idea that leads us to do exercises like a jerk recovery, starting with the bar at like the brow or the top of the nose. And that's because that's about where we assume you can throw the bar, and that's about the height at which you start driving. As you go down, you're driving up on the bar. What becomes really important is that you're always, I tell my athletes to make sure you're closing the space between the bar and the ground always. So you're pushing up on the bar as you're driving your body down, and what you don't want is for there to be any time between when you hit that lockout and you fall into, or you drop into your split position. That has to be perfectly timed so that you're wedging yourself between the bar and the ground. Does that make sense, Greg?
Yes, and that's.
I mean, we do it in the snatch as well, and it does require good kinesthetics. But if you don't have them, then we start working on exercises that teach you how to do that. It becomes a little harder for us to teach you how to feel like the height of your drive, but something like a jerk with a pause in the dip helps you get a sense of how high you can drive the bar and when you need to start pushing on it. And it's why that exercise, I think, is fairly ubiquitous in training for most good athletes. When you describe what you're doing, Milo, the bar is falling back down on you. That means you're pushing up on it too late. So for you, it seems that when we talk about this press out, I guess it could be that you're delayed on one side, but for me, when I read this, because you tend to short step, if you tend to short step, then you're not as low, and that's why you're pressing out. But for a lot of athletes, that press out, when we have both elbows going, I thought he had that, is the bar falling back down on you. In that case, if you push up, and you're locked. So you're locked for a second, then you unlock and relock, you are activating too late. And you're dipping too low. You're dropping too low. if in your case, because you short step, your hips are higher. And so when the weight gets heavier, you're pressing out because your body is not as low as it needs to be. So I don't even know that this is the right question for you, but it's a good question.
Well, I would go farther than that and say that I always say this. I wrote an article about this. If it's in here, I probably did write an article about it at one time. I've been doing it for 1,000 years. A lot of times that short stepping is less an issue of the actual split footwork and driving under than it is about the drive up. In other words, a short step a lot of the time is the result of an inadequate upward drive on the bar. And so you said your timing is a primary contributor, you think, and I would tend to agree, but I would say that it's not necessarily just the timing of your arms locking out. It may be the timing of transitioning from your drive up into your split. And so like a cue you'll hear me say a lot in the gym is, finish your drive before you split. And so it's really common in a split jerk for people to start splitting prematurely because they're so focused on that footwork, like, oh my God, I got to get my feet out, that they only drive halfway up. And, the rest is just kind of through existing momentum, and then they're already moving under the bar. And that will work at the lighter weights, and eventually you're going to hit a wall where suddenly the bar doesn't just fly up into the air all on its own. And so that's why I know Ursula does this too, but using push presses and power jerks a lot, and using them in combination with split jerks, and even jerks behind the neck. I think all of those really contribute to learning that timing and learning kind of like that amplitude of the drive properly, so that you can then transfer that to a split jerk and feel that patience that is really required. And that's probably more of an issue for the more kind of strength dependent jerkers who have to drive a little longer, versus the really elastic jerkers who they may never even get to a completely straight knee in that drive. They may stop short of that in every one of their heavy jerks, and that'll be fine, just because they're able to achieve that maximal upward speed so quickly. But though all those things will kind of help with that. And I think what Ursula was saying earlier about wedging yourself under the bar and not having what am I trying to say?
Space and time.
Space-time continuum. If you look at really good jerkers, you'll see that the feet hitting the ground and the elbows locking appears to occur at the exact same time. And pretty much in any case, if you watch a really slow motion video, the feet are going to land first before the arms are totally straight. But in real time, it should appear that it's happening simultaneously. But what you'll notice is that when they receive it, there's no subsequent movement. In other words, it's just boom, they're done. Everything is still in position and stable. Versus someone who is not quite adept at the jerk, well, you'll see the kind of this like floating and then sinking motion where they launch the bar up and there's kind of this moment of floating, and then they change directions and then get under it, and then the bar kind of comes down onto them. Versus kind of what Ursula was saying is where the bar is going up and you are going down, and so you're pushing yourself down, pushing the bar up, pushing away from the two things are being pushed away from each other, and they never really come back toward each other, if that makes sense. And I need a whiteboard or something. We need an animator. We need the
like the dancing baby.
No, we need the animator who did the all the Ricky Gervais podcasts. Amazing. Okay. All right. We got one more question here with another name I'm unsure of. Bayou asks, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. Took your level 1 course this past summer in Richmond, Virginia. Well, thank you. And wondering if you have a systematic way of reducing volume and or intensity for a deload week. In parentheses, back off week, which is my preferred terminology. I don't know why, it's just what we've always used. My method to date is typically to eliminate all max effort sets. That's a good start for a back off week. Single efforts as well as all rep maxes, and to cut volume in half while leaving the intensity the same. When deloading was originally introduced to me by a fellow strength and conditioning coach, he was cutting both the volume and intensity in half, But from my own personal experience, that reduction was too much, as getting back into the heavier loads was hell the following week, which is why I started to leave the loads relatively heavy, but not above 90%, and simply cut the reps of each set in half. I also tend to make supplemental work optional on a deload week. Thoughts? I have thoughts. Ursula, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so far he's on the right track. I think you can reduce too much. Now, if you're going into, like, you're really going to peak and you're not worried about the week after because it's a competition, then, you know, you're not concerned about what is going to, unless you're training through an event. You really, I mean, I think you can back off too much in terms of the psychology of the athlete. Once you start reducing that intensity over time, they start to get kind of freaked out. So I think you have to play this based on the ability for the athlete to recover, how much they're recovering, and the chances that they could actually start losing strength if you cut too much for too long. But he's just talking about a single week in the middle, in the midst of a longer cycle. So I mean, I think he's on the right track. I don't know if I say cut everything in half. I just have,
that's a lot.
I just have a decrease in load. I would say that I've never cut anything in half until maybe we get closer to competition week. Yeah. And then that's probably true that I've cut the total load. He says volume intensity. I prefer to go ahead and multiply those and call it the load. Might cut the load by maybe 40% or something like that, but 30% even. I think that if you intend to continue progressing, you don't want that reduction to be too significant. And really, let's say we're looking at like 12 weeks. If you have a back off week, say week 4 or 5, usually mine's the week 6, that back off week is going to look different than 5 weeks down the road when I have a back off week, because that back off week, by the time I get into the second 4 to 6 week microcycle, I'm gonna, is that what it's called? I don't know these fancy words.
Mesocycle.
But once I get into that, the microcycle is the actual week, right?
Yeah.
At the end of that macrocycle, that reduction is still going to be heavier than that, than the first one, because the first one, in terms of the load, was already lower. Yeah. Because I didn't have the combination of intensity and volume like I would in the second macrocycle. So, I mean, I would say that those back off weeks can look different, but in general, what we're looking at is a reduction of load in intensity and volume. And he put load next to intensity as if those are the same. And for us, that's a percentage. And the load is actually the total tonnage. So I don't know if strength and conditioning coaches look at it differently. But I think as long as you have enough of a reduction in load that the athlete is able then to move into the next week and feel somewhat refreshed, that's what you're trying to do. You're allowing for some higher level of recuperation and recovery so that they can continue. But
it's not complete recuperation. I think that people make that mistake is they're expecting to be completely recuperated, which I don't think you're really completely recuperated until the end of your weightlifting career, to be perfectly honest. But definitely not in the middle of a cycle.
About year 2 after you've retired.
Yeah. My probably unsatisfactory response is going to be that I don't have a formulaic way of doing this because there's way too much individual variation. So I have lifters. Basically what I do is I determine what works best for each lifter individually. They all have their own programs anyway, so I don't have to do the same thing for everyone. Some of my lifters respond well to a significant reduction of volume and only a very small reduction in intensity. Others are the exact opposite. Some of them I need to cut the intensity way down, get most stuff into like that 70 to 75% range, as an example, but I can keep, the reps essentially the same, although the overall volume I'll cut down a little bit. Maybe, like you said, cutting out a little accessory work is usually a good idea, although not all of it necessarily. And so it really is something that requires some experimentation. So I would say if you're looking for a more formulaic approach, I do kind of outline some things in my book in the 3rd edition, and Bob Takano does in his book.
Yeah, I was going
in
to
terms
say
of
Bob's book.
The volume distribution across a mesocycle, that sort of thing. But again, those are guidelines. It's not going to give you a perfect solution for every situation and for every lifter, and there are just so many factors that go into it that need to be considered that you really can't, in my opinion, have a formulaic approach to anything really in weightlifting programming. And so basically, as Ursula said, you have to find the balance of basically walking your lifter back off the ledge that they're standing on, looking down over at the end of the week because they're so beat, getting them feeling good. So by, that next Monday, assuming you're using a normal week cycle, that they're just chomping at the bit, ready to go. And not, cutting back so much, like you were saying, that they just turn into slobs and they just are like, oh, I don't want to train. Everything feels heavy. And in my experience, I even use kind of different approaches based on specific exercises too. You know what I mean? Like, so for some people, I have to cut the intensity and the volume of squats way down. And, maybe the pulls are going to stay fairly heavy. Maybe the lifts are going to stay fairly heavy, but the squats have to get reduced a lot. Or vice versa, where I'll have someone in squats and pulls stay, they'll reduce maybe 10% or something, but, snatch and clean and jerk stuff stays relatively heavy. So it really is so individual. And unfortunately, the only way of really determining what works best for an individual is doing it and taking notes and seeing what's happening. So, and remember, you can't judge the effectiveness of a recovery week until the next week, because during that back off week, everyone's going to feel like shit, no matter how much you back them off. Mm-hmm. And so that's something you really have to keep in mind, is that people are going to freak out like, oh my God, this is 70%. Why does it feel so heavy? Why am I so slow? Why am I such a horrible person? And of course, the response is that the reason we're doing a back off week right now is because you need it, and that's why you feel like shit. So it shouldn't be surprising. It's just like, honestly, a taper week for competition. I tell people, like, you're not going to feel good until pretty much the day before the competition, and you probably won't really know you feel good because we're not really going to train. So you have to trust it. If it's Wednesday and you compete on Saturday and things still don't feel great, you don't have to panic. So yeah, experimentation, lots of note taking, and I would say that definitely don't do something so dramatic like reduction by 50%. That's just too much. Yeah. And I guess I would say that generally speaking, though, the reduction in volume is going to be more effective than reduction in intensity. For most people, you'll get more effect out of the volume reduction. Would you agree with that? Yep. Okay.
I mean, that's because intensity is going to have to keep climbing. So I generally don't take too much off of the intensity. I might take, what I'll take is the reps off. So they might be doing the week before, 80% for triples, and then now they're doing 80% for singles again. I'd rather do that than drop the percentage down.
Right.
And then have them feel like, and then of course they're like, well, what's happening? This 80% last week I could do it for 3 and it felt like nothing. And this week it's hard just to do singles. And you're like, well, duh, that's why you're only doing singles with it, because that's all you can do right now. And yeah, I mean, I think, if we're looking at the textbook stuff, I mean, they generally have you back off like 10 to 15% overall, like in the intensity with the reduction. That affects the load to maybe 20% of the load. I mean, I think 50% is extraordinary. I think once you get to that pre-competition week, different people do different things, and I've seen people reduce that much.
Yeah.
Especially when you're looking at the fact that the week before you were probably hitting some of your heaviest singles that you've hit in the entire cycle itself. Usually 7 days out you're hitting your last heavy snatch, about 10 days out you're hitting your last heavy clean and jerk, about 14 days out you're hitting your last heavy back squat. I usually keep a front squat in that second to last week still. and I even have my athletes sometimes jerk fairly heavy into that last weekend, especially if they have problems with jerk. But that's mostly psychological. It has less to do with their need to maintain volume and intensity, or the need to maintain intensity, really.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've had athletes that completely panic when you start cutting. And as long as they're recovering, I mean, maybe we bring in more recovery modalities for those weeks. And instead of doing less supplemental work, do more supplemental work and take out a lot of the technical work, which is, you know, nervous system heavy. So it just depends on what's tired. Like if I look at their squat programming and say, well, their legs are probably shot to shit right now, let me pull off, instead of squatting 3 times this week, we're just going to squat once. And so I might even do that reduction based more on what exercises or what body parts, what movements need rest. If we've been pulling, like going through pull cycles, I might focus on reducing pulls and let their squats stay up. And so that deload week can look different at the end of different blocks.
Yeah.
Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, throw that on out there. All right. I feel that we've done our duty today.
Are we doing feelings?
No, that's a good point. I don't give a fuck about your feelings. Feelings are meaningless except in how they influence your words and actions. Remember that, kids. Okay.
It's a lie.
That's not a lie.
It's okay to have feelings, people. Just don't tell Greg about them.
I didn't say it wasn't okay to have feelings. You have to have feelings. What I'm saying is you don't get credit for your feelings unless you do something with them.
Oh. I thought you were going to go back to just push them way back deep inside.
If you kill 40 people and you feel bad about it, you're still an asshole. Right?
Well, I mean, it depends on who you've killed and why, but...
Okay. Assuming it was unwarranted,
you could be my hero.
Ursula. Okay. So, guys, do us a favor and go to iTunes or whatever you listen to on. Leave us a nice review so that other people can learn how great the show is and come listen. And because who knows? This thing could only be on for one more episode or a million.
Shut up. I feel like he's going to let y'all know that it would be my fault if that was the case.
No, it would just stop appearing. It would just
disappear into the ether. Just gone.
One of the great mysteries of weightlifting.
Yeah, just ended and nobody knows why.
Did Greg and Ursula die? No one knows. We get so much more of an audience that way.
The real irony for me is like how hard I had to work to convince Greg that this was a great idea, and then what a fucking asshole I am.
Yeah. And how hard you still have to work to convince me every single time to not shut it down.
Like, fuck it, don't call me then. Fine, it's over. I swear, Greg, I'm going to call you. I swear.
Stop, Ursula. You're making the children nervous about an impending divorce. It's going to be fine, guys. I can tolerate her a little bit longer.
Just a little.
That's we'll see. Only if she acts right. I'm just kidding. I love Ursula. She's great. I wouldn't put up with this shit for anyone else.
Oh, thanks, Greg.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, guys. Thank you again for listening. Oh, also, we had a couple emails from people who were like, I don't know how to submit questions. Go to catalystathletics.com/podcast, and on the right column, there is a little thing right there to submit a question. Or if you're on a mobile device, it might be in the little drop-down menu. Either way, it's in there, I promise. All right. Thank you, guys. Ursula, last words?
Just see y'all in 2 weeks.
Approximately.
Are we gonna release this one today?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So yeah, 2 weeks.
Okay, guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.